Liquidate everything. Now, 10 minutes after the divorce, I heard my mother was pulling hundreds of millions, and my mother-in-law was ecstatic. They say divorce is the end of a marriage, but for me, it was just the beginning of the truth. 10 minutes after my pen left the paper, they thought I would walk out of their lives with nothing. They laughed, calling it a deliverance for the Sterling family. But when the banking system's alerts for an emergency capital withdrawal began to chime, that once arrogant corporation finally understood that the person they had just thrown out wasn't a powerless wife, but the one holding the key that could bring them down overnight. And as the first scream echoed from the Sterling Enterprises boardroom, "Why are the accounts frozen?" I just stood at a distance, a soft smile on my lips. Because they never understood that a woman's silence isn't weakness. It's the moment she's calculating. I signed the divorce papers with a single, clean stroke. No trembling hands, no hesitation. A faint scratching sound was the only thing that broke the silence of the crowded lawyer's office. But to me, it was the sound of a frayed cord, worn thin for years, finally snapping. Less than 10 minutes after signing, before I could even stand up to smooth out my dress, the phone in my purse vibrated once. A single text from the fund tracking system I had been quietly maintaining for 3 years. Abnormal, fund transfer. Over $100 million from Sterling Premier Project account. I hadn't even opened the message when Victoria Sterling's voice, as sharp and cold as a razor on glass, cut through the air. She stood in the middle of the lobby, clutching a designer handbag, her eyes sweeping over me with contempt. She curled her lip and spoke loudly enough for the entire hallway to hear. "You'll leave this family without so much as a silver spoon. I'll take care of the money." A few people in the waiting area flinched and turned to look. Humiliating others in public was a habit of hers. I used to be accustomed to it, or thought I was. But today, her words felt like a bucket of ice water, making my chest tighten. Julian stepped forward to stand beside her, arms crossed, the expensive watch I'd helped buy him when we were first married gleaming on his wrist. Today, its shine on his cold skin was a bitter reminder. He leaned down, his voice low but loud enough for the 3 paralegals nearby to hear clearly. "You can't take anything, Evelyn. You're walking away with nothing." I looked up at his face, calmer than I expected. 3 years of marriage, and I never thought his eyes would one day look at me the way one looks at an object that's been used and is ready to be discarded. But it was happening, right here. I didn't answer, not because I was weak, but because in that moment, I saw one thing clearly. Any protest would only make them happier. And I had no desire to give them any more joy from my pain. I turned to leave, but as I did, I heard Victoria Sterling let out a laugh. Someone hold the door for her. My former daughter-in-law looked so pathetic. The click-clack of her heels on the marble floor sounded as if this divorce signing was a celebration of her own achievement. And I, the one just expelled from their lives, felt as though I'd been lifted from invisible shackles. I stepped through the glass doors. The afternoon sun hit my face. The sound of car horns, of people walking, of the office machinery whirring behind me, it all blended into a strange symphony, as if a new life was pulling me out of a deep pit. I stood on the steps, took a long, deep breath, and opened my phone. At that exact moment, the glass door behind me swung open, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. "What are you still standing there for? Just go, Evelyn. No one in this family has anything to do with you anymore." Julian's voice, still with that condescending tone to prove he'd won. I didn't turn around. My fingers swiped across the screen, opening the alert. The transfer amount flashed before my eyes. $128.4 million. The funds were from a project my own mother had provided the seed capital for, and they had been quietly siphoning it. They had been too hasty. I opened my contacts and tapped a name I had kept silent for 3 years. Leo. Before hitting send, I glanced back at the lobby through the reflective glass. Victoria Sterling was chatting with some acquaintances, her eyes flicking towards me as if looking at trash being taken out. Julian stood beside her, adjusting his collar, a look of pure self-satisfaction on his face. They thought I had lost, but they didn't know that from that moment on. The board had been flipped. I typed a single line. Execute. Activate the withdrawal clause. Immediately, the moment I hit send, the message was marked as read. 3 years ago, my mother told me, "Daughter, don't say much. When the time comes, one sentence is all you need." Just as I put my phone away, a text from an unknown number popped up. "Miss Evelyn, do you know they're draining the project's capital? I have proof. I can send it right away if you want." The sender was David, a financial assistant at Sterling Enterprises, the same man Victoria had humiliated in a meeting I'd accidentally witnessed. I gripped my phone. A chill ran down my spine. So I wasn't the only one who saw the rot. Others were waiting for the right moment to speak. Behind me, Victoria's voice rang out again. Julian, let's go. What's there to look at? That kind of person has finally gone back to where she belongs. I didn't turn back, but I smiled softly. A smile not of joy, but of realization. Sometimes, the people who think they hold all the power are the ones about to fall the hardest. I pulled my suitcase down the steps and hailed a taxi. As the car door closed, I looked at my phone screen one last time. A message from Leo appeared. I've been waiting for this message for 3 years. And at that exact moment, I knew the real battle had just begun. Chapter 2. The morning before the divorce, the New York sun was a harsh, unforgiving glare. It reflected off the polished marble floors of the foyer, making the already vast mansion feel even colder. I had just stepped out of the dining room, my warm water unfinished, when a loud bang from the top of the grand staircase made me jump. Victoria Sterling stood high above, her eyes as sharp as a scalpel. In her hand was a medium-sized black suitcase. She didn't drop it. She threw it directly towards my feet. The heavy thud echoed through the house. The housekeeper, standing by a pillar, turned pale. You have 1 hour to pack. You take nothing but your personal belongings. Her voice was like a gavel striking a judge's bench. I stared at the suitcase, lying forlornly in front of me. A strange feeling, a mix of stinging pain and numbness, washed over me. It felt less like I was being kicked out of my husband's home and more like they were shooing away a stray who had overstayed her welcome. I bent down to pick it up, my hand trembling slightly. The two maids nearby exchanged a glance. They both wanted to step forward and help, but they flinched back under Victoria's gaze. One of them whispered, as if afraid I'd hear but also unable to stay silent, Miss Evelyn, just pack quickly. She's in a bad mood. A bad mood. Such a mild phrase to describe the act of throwing someone out like a stray cat. I dragged the suitcase up the stairs. Each step felt like pulling up a memory, a piece of the faith I once had in a life together. The house was eerily silent, save for the sound of the suitcase wheels rolling over the marble steps, a constant reminder of my situation. When I reached the bedroom, I paused at the door of the room where I had tried so hard to build my peace. Everything was as neat as it was yesterday. The bed was perfectly made, the curtains half open, letting in long streaks of light across the floor. I opened my closet. My few outfits were hung neatly in the left corner, while the majority of the space on the right had been cleared to make room for Julian's brand new dress shirts. The faint scent of a man's cologne, one I used to love, now made my throat feel tight. I carefully folded each item, placing it in the suitcase as if I were just packing for a short trip. Then my hand touched the bottom drawer. The drawer Julian always kept locked, but last night, he'd forgotten. After a moment of hesitation, I pulled it open. Inside was a small box, not one of mine. I lifted the lid. The gleam of metal flashed a high-end bracelet, exquisitely crafted, with a sophisticated design that caught the eye. The same bracelet I had seen 2 weeks ago on the wrist of Isabella, the corporation's beautiful PR specialist. The woman who laughed a little too loudly at Julian's jokes. The one his gaze always lingered on for a fraction too long. I picked up the bracelet, turning it in the light. The small stones refracted into a shower of sparkles. I used to have a habit of asking myself where I went wrong whenever I was sad. But now, I understood. I wasn't wrong. I was just in the wrong place. Just as I was holding the bracelet, a soft knock came from the door. David, Julian's financial assistant, stood at the threshold, looking awkward when he saw me. Sorry to disturb you. I just wanted to return the USB drive you asked me to transfer some files onto. I placed the bracelet back in its box and looked at him. Is something wrong? David swallowed hard, took a step inside, and lowered his voice. Honestly, you should leave soon. This morning, I heard Mr. Sterling and his mother talking about the project accounts. They said they have to withdraw all the capital before you sign the papers, so you can't claim anything. I stood still, my hand resting on the edge of the drawer. His words didn't hurt as much as I thought they would. Instead, they felt like a missing puzzle piece clicking into place. Thank you, I said softly. He nodded, giving me a look of sympathy before leaving. As soon as the door closed, I looked back at the bracelet in the box. Now I understood why I had gradually become invisible in Julian's eyes. His attention had already been placed elsewhere. And Victoria Sterling was just waiting for the chance to kick me out without having to shed a single tear of feigned pity. I zipped up the suitcase, added a few small things, and just as I was about to leave the room, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Are you okay, Eve? If you're not, come home." I stared at the words for a long time. In 3 years of marriage, I had never once complained. I thought if I just tried harder, my husband's family would see my efforts. But it turned out some people never see anything beyond themselves. I texted back, "Don't worry, Mom. I'm okay." Then I stood up straight and gave the room one last look. As a wife in this house for 3 years, I had cried countless times, endured so much humiliation, but it was also here that I learned how to be silent when I needed to be, and how to remember what must be remembered. Divorce. I thought it was an ending, but that bracelet in the drawer made me understand one thing clearly. This was just the moment they were preparing to make public what they had been hiding for so long. And they had no idea I was also making preparations of my own. I pulled the suitcase and left the room. When I reached the foyer, Victoria was waiting, arms crossed, a triumphant look on her face, undisguised. "Hurry up. I have a meeting. The longer you stay here, the more bad luck you bring." I looked her straight in the eye, so calmly that she flinched slightly. But I said nothing. It wasn't necessary. In just a few hours, the one with bad luck wouldn't be. Some days, I wondered what kind of person I had become after 3 years of being a Sterling. A quiet person, a submissive one, a woman of few words who kept her head down. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the way they treated me had created a different version of Evelyn. A version that looked meek on the outside, but was filled with cuts on the inside that kindness could no longer heal. I, Evelyn Hayes, graduated with honors in finance. When I married Julian, I thought my knowledge would help my husband's family manage their cash flow and expand their projects. But at the very first family dinner, when I proposed a restructuring plan, Victoria Sterling put down her chopsticks and looked me up and down as if I were a worn-out coat. "You learn from books. Leave that be. Your job is to take care of your husband and children. The adults will handle the business." That sentence hung in front of me like a framed picture for 3 years. Whenever I tried to offer an opinion, she would give a cold smile. Whenever I asked about finances, Julian would brush it off. Even my personal expense account was controlled by them, given and taken away at their whim. But I wasn't completely silent. I remembered, I observed, and I learned to read the things no one wanted to show me. While I was being looked down upon, Julian Sterling was treated as the family jewel. Handsome, well-dressed, a smooth talker, always carrying the title of division president when he went out. But the truth was, more than half of his decisions were made by his mother from behind the scenes. I once overheard a conversation between them in his study, Victoria's voice as sharp as metal. "Just sign it, son. Mother has everything covered. We have to win this project at any cost." Julian's only reply was, "Whatever you say, Mom." It wasn't filial piety. It was dependency. A man who thought he stood at the top but had, in fact, never walked on his own 2 feet. As for Victoria Sterling, her name was well known in the business world. A woman who built her empire with an iron fist and boundless ambition. She was talented, sharp, and possessed a rare tenacity. But along with that came a need for control, so suffocating it choked everyone around her. I once witnessed her berate David, the financial assistant, in front of nearly 20 people, just because he was late in sending a report. "Is this how you work? Do I pay you to see this look of failure on your face? If you can't do the job, then get out." David lowered his head, his hands trembling slightly. I was standing by the door of the conference room that day, a chill running down my spine. A person who constantly spoke of business ethics. Yet her treatment of employees made it clear that in her eyes, there were only results, not people. I still remember my first meeting with a lawyer, Leo. I had only been married for 8 months. My mother wanted to ensure the initial capital she invested in Sterling Enterprises was managed according to the agreement, so she had Leo provide legal counsel. He looked at me for a long time and said, "If one day you need the law, you must stand firm, not to defeat anyone, but to protect yourself." I didn't fully understand his words until now. Leo was the only person I could trust during my 3 years of marriage. He didn't talk much, but every time he did, it made me think. Once, I asked him, "If a family treats you with contempt, what should you do?" He looked out the window and said, "You either walk away, or you wait for the right moment to change your position." I never thought I would end up choosing both. In the journey of witnessing the Sterling family's downfall, I had a few outsiders who became crucial links. Chloe, a bank employee where Sterling Enterprises held a major account, was one of them. The first time we met at a company party, she whispered, "Miss Evelyn, sometimes your silence scares people more than you think." She was the first person to inform me of unusual transactions related to the Anson project. More importantly, she dared to tell the truth. I've been in banking for years. No one is perfectly clean, but the Sterlings are dirty in a way that shows they think they're above everyone. Chloe had a sharp sense of observation, and she saw what others missed. David was a different type of person. Patient, experienced, aware of his low position, and therefore always cautious. After being humiliated by Victoria in the conference room, he met me in the parking garage. "Miss Evelyn, everyone here thinks you're gentle, so they say whatever they want. But I don't think so." I just smiled without replying, but he continued, "Some people are gentle because they haven't made their move yet. The way you look at financial data doesn't seem like someone who's easily bullied." His words planted a small seed. He was the one who sent me the first message about them illegally withdrawing capital. And finally, there was Isabella, the woman Julian called a business partner, but everyone knew what she really was. I met her in the elevator lobby one afternoon. She looked me over with a scrutinizing gaze, then smiled with a mix of contempt and pity. "Miss Evelyn, a woman needs to know when to let go. Why hold on to a man whose heart is no longer with you?" I looked directly at her wrist, where the sparkling bracelet I had found in Julian's drawer that morning now sat. I replied, "Thank you. I let go a long time ago. It's just that they're only realizing it today." Isabella flinched, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty appeared in her eyes. I realized that what people like her feared most was not the legal wife, but a silent woman who saw through everything. Putting these pieces together, I realized something more clearly than ever. For the past 3 years, I had not been alone. There were people watching, people who saw the injustices I endured. More importantly, whether intentionally or not, they were the links that would help me put everything back in its rightful place. In that family, they thought I was just a shadow. But each person in this story reflected a part of me: my silence, my endurance, my memory. No one knew that after signing the divorce papers, I had already begun to stand in a different position. And every character who appeared in my life today was a crucial piece in a battle no one saw coming. I looked at myself in the mirror that day, no longer the young, newlywed bride, no longer the woman afraid of her mother-in-law's glare, and certainly no longer the wife trying to hold on to her husband's indifference. I had become a different Evelyn, and they would soon find out. The afternoon before the divorce, the grand Sterling mansion felt more suffocating than ever. The air in the living room was so heavy, it felt like someone had lit a smoldering pile of ash that no one would put out. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands clasped together, feeling a strange sense of peace. But it was this very peace that irritated them. Victoria Sterling sat in the large armchair, her fingers tapping a rhythm on the armrest, as if I owed her a debt I could never repay. She looked at me with a mixture of boredom and triumph, then uttered the familiar phrase I had heard until my ears were numb for the past 3 years. "This family supported you for 3 years. You should be grateful." The words were spoken as if it were a self-evident truth, a blessing from on high. But in reality, it felt like they had tied a rope around my neck, ready to pull it whenever they pleased. I slowly raised my head. For the first time in months, I didn't avoid her gaze. Seeing this, she smirked. "What are you looking at? You think you have the right to sit there and look at me? A woman who can't even produce an heir isn't worth keeping." The atmosphere instantly turned frigid. The butler, who was carrying a pitcher of water, froze, nearly dropping the lid. I knew that line was coming. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, but today it felt like a final declaration to justify kicking me out. Julian came down the stairs, wearing a crisp white shirt, his hair lightly styled. He looked at me with an indifferent gaze, as if I were a stranger who had accidentally wandered into his house. "Mom's right. It's been 3 years, Evelyn, with no good news. I've been under a lot of pressure too. I didn't want to say it, but Mom said it for me." I didn't cry. I didn't suppress my anger. I didn't say a word. It was my silence that made them think I had conceded defeat. Victoria laughed triumphantly. "Look at her, Julian, a woman who doesn't even have the right to be a mother. What's the point of keeping her? A waste of food, and she brings bad luck to the family." Her words weren't knives, but each one was like a small thorn, pricking me bit by bit. For 3 years as a daughter-in-law, I had heard enough of this. They didn't care that during that time I had undergone countless tests, what the doctors had said, or that Julian was the one with the problem. They just needed someone to blame, and I was the most convenient target. Julian sat down next to his mother, crossing his arms and looking at me. If you have any sense, you'll sign the papers tomorrow morning and leave quietly. It'll be easier for both of us. You don't have anything to hold on to anyway. I heard my own voice in my head, the old me, always asking why, always blaming myself. But today, as they threw those blade-like words at me, I felt a very different kind of emptiness. An emptiness that didn't hurt me, but woke me up. I stood up, slowly and gracefully. Victoria Sterling narrowed her eyes. "Where are you going?" I looked her straight in the eye for the first time in 3 years. "I'm going upstairs to pack. After I sign tomorrow, I'll leave." Not another word. No justifications. No begging. Victoria was slightly taken aback. Perhaps she didn't expect me to comply so easily. She wanted an argument to prove I was in the wrong, but I didn't give her the chance. Julian frowned. "You're not going to ask my opinion?" I turned my head. "You've already said it, haven't you? We have nothing to hold on to." A flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes, but he couldn't argue, as he had been the one to say it. The many times I cried, he was silent. The many times I asked to talk, he avoided me. Today, when I said I was leaving, he acted as if it was unfamiliar. Victoria leaned back in her chair, letting out a soft laugh. "Good. It's good that you know your place. This house has no room for someone so barren." The word barren. She emphasized every syllable. The butler bowed his head. The two maids glanced at me with sympathy, but no one dared to speak. I started up the stairs, but just as my hand touched the banister, Victoria's voice rose from below. "Remember to bring your medical records. Who knows, your next husband's family might need to see them." A few soft chuckles rippled through the room. The laughter wasn't loud, but I heard every beat. It was like the sound of nails being hammered into the floor every time she spoke. I paused for only a second before continuing up. But there was one thing they didn't know. My silence had changed. It was no longer endurance. It was observation, the step back a person takes before lunging forward. The conflict was no longer about how they insulted me, but about the fact that from that moment on, I no longer considered them my family. The look in my eyes when I turned back was no longer downcast and sad. It made Victoria flinch, a very subtle movement. In that moment, I knew she wasn't completely oblivious. She just didn't think I had the strength to change anything. They thought I would leave in shame, but they didn't know that shame, when accumulated, becomes a detonator. And I, the one they thought was the most submissive, was the one who knew exactly when to light the fuse. That evening, the Sterling mansion was lit up as if for an engagement party, not a farewell to a marriage. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses spilled out onto the lawn. Servants moved about, carrying trays of fragrant food. The atmosphere in the living room was so festive that a passerby might think the family was celebrating a momentous occasion. And they were. They were celebrating my imminent disappearance from their lives. I stood just outside the living room, hidden by the wooden door frame, watching it all unfold, unnoticed. They didn't notice because they thought I no longer had any right to be in this house. In the center of the room, Victoria Sterling raised a glass of wine, her eyes sparkling as if she'd just closed a billion-dollar deal. "My son is finally free of his burden." Her voice boomed across the room, and the group of relatives and close business partners burst into laughter. A gray-haired man joked, "Victoria, you always say that, but it rings true every time. Your Evelyn really hit the jackpot, getting into a rich family for a few years." A heavily jeweled woman added, "Jackpot? I don't see it. All I see is bad luck. Look at Julian's face lately, so much brighter. It's right to be rid of her." Julian leaned against the sofa, a glass of beer in hand, a faint smile on his lips. He raised his glass in response to the toasts, as if our 3-year marriage was nothing more than a failed contract, terminated early. I once thought I would cry if I heard such words. But no, I stood there, so calm that I myself found it strange, as if I were listening to a story about someone else, not me. Victoria looked around and asked, "Where is she?" "On the verge of a divorce, and she's sulking in a corner somewhere." A younger cousin replied, "Probably packing her things." "Oh, who cares? As long as she signs quickly tomorrow. It's all good." The group laughed again, a gleeful, hollow sound that cast long, distorted shadows on the walls. I quietly stepped back, not wanting to hear any more. But just then, my phone vibrated softly. I opened it. It was David. The project's cash flow is being drained abnormally. They think you don't know. I reread the message several times. My heart didn't beat any faster, but I felt as if a door was slowly creaking open in my mind. I texted back, "Can you be more specific?" Less than 10 seconds later, a new message arrived. "David, they're pulling money from the Anson Fund. The reason they're using is operational costs, but the amount is too large, especially right now." I closed my eyes. I wasn't surprised. A person like Victoria Sterling would never let go of anything without clawing back a huge chunk for herself. But they didn't know that the Anson project was funded with my mother's capital, and I was the one legally designated to oversee its cash flow. The clauses they thought I didn't understand, I had actually read them until I knew them by heart. Just then, someone's voice drifted out from the room. "Victoria, what about Apex Capital's investment? Aren't you afraid they'll sue?" Victoria laughed loudly. "Sue for what? Once that girl Evelyn signs the divorce papers, she forfeits her rights. Besides, if Apex tries to make a move, I'll take care of them in a heartbeat." The whole room erupted in laughter. Standing behind the door, I clutched my phone, a hard-to-describe feeling rising within me. Not pain, but clarity. A clarity as still and flat as the water before a storm. My phone lit up again. "David, if you want, I can get a copy of the detailed withdrawal records, but it has to be done tonight." I texted back just one sentence, "Get it. And don't let anyone know." I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and looked back at the brightly lit house. The laughter, the toasts, the clinking glasses all blended into a chaotic symphony. Every laugh that rang out was another stab at our past. But to me, now, that laughter was just a signal that Victoria Sterling had grown too confident in her victory. And it was that very confidence that would leave her vulnerable. Just as I was about to leave, a small voice called out from behind me. "Miss Evelyn." I turned. It was Chloe, the bank employee who had assisted my husband's family. She was standing in the shadows, a worried look on her face. I overheard them talking about withdrawing capital. "Are you sure you're okay?" I looked at her for a long time, then asked, "Whose side are you on?" Chloe bit her lip, then replied, "I'm on the side of the person who isn't in the wrong." I nodded slowly. That one sentence was enough for me to know I wasn't entirely alone in this. As I walked out of the Sterling family's gate, the sound of laughter still echoed behind me. Gleeful, loud, and carefree, as if they had no idea that every word, every action, was building a trap for themselves. A trap they were about to fall into. And I, the one once treated as a shadow in that house, was now the one holding the key to lock the door behind them. Chapter 6. I settled into the back of a silver taxi. As the door closed, the noise from the mansion behind me was instantly cut off, as if I had stepped into another world. Outside, the streetlights blurred. Cars rushed by, and inside me was a long, cold emptiness. The driver asked gently, "Where to, ma'am?" I stared out the window for a moment before answering. "To the financial district, please." My voice was quiet but firm. I was a little surprised by my own certainty. The car started moving. I rested my head against the cool glass, the chills seeping into my temple, jolting memories I had tried to suppress for years. 3 years as a wife. 3 years I kept silent because I thought keeping the peace in their family would keep my marriage intact. 3 years I made myself small because I thought if I was meek, they would be kind. But it turned out I had only learned one thing. Being gentle in front of decent people is a virtue. But being gentle in front of those who see you as dirt is suicide. I remembered the evenings in that vast mansion, waiting for dinner at a cold table. Julian would be out with clients until late, returning home with the scent of another woman's perfume. I would ask softly, "Have you eaten?" He wouldn't look at me, just say, "Don't bother me." The dinner I had cooked would be put in the fridge, and in the morning, I would quietly throw it away, not daring to ask again. I remembered the family meetings. When I tried to offer advice on financial management, Victoria Sterling would dismiss it. What does a fresh graduate know about business? I stayed silent. I always did, even when they made me sit at a lower table during family gatherings, citing my childlessness as the reason. Even when they said in front of me, "This family doesn't let a useless woman sit at the head table," I still sat there, forcing a weak smile, pretending I didn't hear. But in truth, every word fell on me like a lead weight. The taxi turned onto Park Avenue. The lights from the storefronts shimmered on the wet pavement like liquid fire. I watched the people passing by, then saw my own reflection in the window. My eyes were swollen, but no tears fell. I had cried enough. I remembered a night a few months ago. I heard Julian on the phone in his study. His voice was very low, but every word slipped through the crack in the door. Just wait until the divorce is final. I can't let my mother lose face. Yeah, I know. I want to move in with you soon, too. I stood behind the door, my hand shaking so much I almost laughed out loud. 3 years. My 3 years ended with those 3 sentences. The taxi crossed a bridge, the wind gently tousling my hair. The driver put on some quiet music, the low notes of a guitar, making my heart feel even heavier. I thought about myself, Evelyn, the woman everyone thought was gentle, agreeable, and never fought back. The woman the Sterling family believed they could cast aside at any moment without a sound. I used to believe that myself. I used to be afraid of losing them, afraid of upsetting Victoria, afraid of Julian's indifference, afraid of the world laughing at me for being left. But the moment I signed those divorce papers, something else sparked in my mind. I had nothing left to lose. My phone lit up again. A message from David. I got the transaction records. The numbers aren't small. They're withdrawing continuously. I stared at the message for a long time. Perhaps they didn't even know. I wasn't angry because I was kicked out. I was angry because they thought I would forever be the naive daughter-in-law who knew nothing and dared to do nothing. I was angry because they believed I would leave in silence. They were so used to looking down on me that they forgot the quietest person is sometimes the most dangerous. The taxi stopped in front of a tall skyscraper, its lights reflecting off the glass facade, illuminating the entire street. I placed my hand on the door handle. Before opening it, I told myself something I never dared to say before. From now on, my life will be written by me, not them. I stepped out of the car. A light drizzle began to fall unexpectedly. I didn't shield myself. The rain was small, but it felt like it was washing away the old things I had clung to for so long. I looked up at the gray sky, and a sense of calm settled in my heart. But it wasn't the calm of surrender. It was the calm of someone about to enter a battle they had long been preparing for. I took a deep breath. It's over. From now on, no one is allowed to write my life but me, and they will pay the price. Not because I want revenge, but because they thought I didn't know how to stand up. The 21st floor of the Apex Capitol building was bathed in a cold, white light. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooked the financial district, a labyrinth of light below. I pushed open the door to a small conference room. Leo was already there, his white shirt perfectly pressed, his expression serious but calm. On the table was a thick file, bound with a metal clip. A single glance told me it was no small matter. He looked up as he saw me. "You're here." His voice was deep and steady as usual, but with a faint undercurrent of tension. I sat down in the chair opposite him, placing my handbag to the side. My hands were cold, but my chest burned, as if a fire was churning inside me. Everything I had suppressed for 3 years was now laid out before me in black and white. Leo turned the file towards me. "This is the capital contribution agreement between your family's group, your mother, and Sterling Enterprises." I flinched slightly. My mother's name, Catherine Hayes, was right on the first page as a strategic investor. He pulled out the second page. "And this is Clause 17.3. If the receiving party uses the capital for unapproved purposes, changes the ownership structure without notification, or engages in opaque fund transfers, the contributing party has the right to withdraw the entire capital and freeze their financial systems immediately." I stared at the words. Each letter seemed to pierce through my chest. 3 years of being looked down upon. 3 years of humiliation because I thought I had no value. 3 years of being pushed to the bottom by Victoria Sterling as if I were nothing. All while the biggest secret was in my hands. Leo clasped his hands. "Evelyn," he said slowly, "your mother didn't tell you everything because she wanted you to have peace. But when she decided to invest in Sterling Enterprises, she did something very smart. She made you the heir to the signing authority." I looked up at him. "Me?" Leo nodded. "If you sign here, the withdrawal clause will be activated instantly. The affiliated bank is ready. They're just waiting for you." In that moment, the room seemed to shrink, leaving only me, the contract, and the choice that would change the entire game. I remembered Julian's laughter in the lawyer's office. I remembered Victoria's words. "You'll leave without so much as a silver spoon." I remembered standing at the mansion's gate, hearing the door close behind me as they cast me out of their lives. That humiliation hadn't disappeared. It had just stepped back to make way for something else. Clarity. Leo pushed a pen towards me. "The decision is yours. If you sign, Sterling Enterprises will be paralyzed by the end of the day." I looked at the pen, lying neatly on the table. A small object, yet powerful enough to make an entire corporation stumble. I picked it up. My hand didn't shake. But before I signed, I looked Leo straight in the eye, my voice low but sharp as a knife. If I do this, there's no going back. There's no need to go back, Evelyn, Leo said. The people you go back to never valued you in the first place. My heart tightened for a beat, not out of pain, but from the realization that it was time to stop saving anything for them. I bent down and signed my name with a clear stroke. The ink flowed smoothly onto the paper, soft but cold. In that moment, I felt as if some chain had fallen away from my heart. Leo took a deep breath and collected the file. From now on, all financial systems related to Sterling Enterprises will be audited. Victoria and Julian will know immediately. I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the ceiling where the white light fell on my face. I didn't smile, but I felt something very clearly. I had just taken myself back. My phone vibrated. A text from David. They're withdrawing more. The money is moving unusually fast. I replied with just 2 words. Let them. Leo looked at me, tilting his head slightly. Are you okay? I exhaled slowly. I'm okay. And for the first time in years, I feel strong. Leo smiled faintly. You haven't seen anything yet. This is just the beginning. I stood up and looked through the glass window of the 21st floor. Below, the city glittered, running on the currents of money Sterling Enterprises thought they controlled. They were wrong. The moment I signed that contract, the power had shifted. I turned away, my hand on the doorknob. A clear, strong, and decisive thought echoed in my mind. The dam has broken, and the flood is coming for them. The news that the project accounts were frozen reached Sterling Enterprises just 18 minutes after my signature dried. It took only 5 more minutes for the atmosphere in the 15th floor boardroom to plummet to rock bottom. In the audio clip David sent me, I could clearly hear Victoria Sterling slamming her hand on the stone conference table, the sound as sharp as a blade. Who authorized them to block my money? Her voice was hoarse with a rage mixed with a panic she was trying desperately to hide. The trembling voice of the chief accountant replied, Ma'am, it's a freeze order based on a clause in the capital contribution agreement with the strategic investor. Which investor? Apex Capital, ma'am. The legal representative is Miss Evelyn's mother. A dead silence filled the room. I could imagine her face turning pale. Her hand clenched so tightly, her knuckles were white. The woman who had always stood at the pinnacle of this building, watching everyone bow before her, was now dealt an unexpected blow by the very daughter-in-law she had just thrown out. However, what made Victoria Sterling formidable was her refusal to admit defeat so quickly. I heard her jump to her feet, demanding an immediate meeting with the bank's executives, contacting the in-house legal team, and ordering the finance department to run a full audit of the transaction systems. Now, a flurry of hurried footsteps followed. Julian's voice, more strained than ever, cut in. Mom, don't panic. It's just temporary. We can move some funds around. We'll make a few transfers, then file for an extension. The bank will ease up. Victoria let out a cold laugh. You think it's that simple? But she nodded, as it was their only option. Immediately, the entire finance department of Sterling Enterprises was thrown into a frantic race against time. They created dummy transactions, shifted funds between internal accounts, and reclassified expenses under subsidiary projects, all to patch the gaping hole that had just opened up. David texted me around 7 p.m. They're scrambling like crazy, trying to put out the fire. The internal audit team is staying overnight. I replied, let them. The more they stir the pot, the more they'll reveal. 30 minutes later, my phone lit up again. An internal message from Chloe at the bank. Evelyn, they just submitted an extension request to the bank. They're citing a system malfunction and asking for 48 hours. I chuckled softly. Just as Leo had predicted. Behind their aggressive facade, Sterling Enterprises was panicking, but they were still deluded enough to think they could fix it. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop in a downtown district. Outside the window, a light rain was falling, the car lights streaking across the wet pavement like smoke. I sipped a hot tea, listened to the notification chime, and read each message. David, they're directing additional transactions through personal accounts of relatives to hide the cash flow. Chloe, for now, the bank hasn't denied the extension, but they're reviewing it. My team knows the problem isn't the system. The messages came in one after another, as if I were sitting in the middle of their intelligence center. I leaned back in my chair, the weight in my chest gone. I had passed the point of no return. And now everything was moving along its intended trajectory. My phone rang again. An unknown number, but I knew who it was. Evelyn? Julian's voice came through, strained. What did you do? Why are the accounts blocked? Have you thought about the consequences? I gave a dry laugh, my voice calm. You're seeing the consequences now, aren't you? Evelyn, this is serious. I don't care what problems you had with my mother, but you can't involve the company. I closed my eyes, sensing the tremor in his voice. A man accustomed to standing above others was now tasting a loss of control for the first time. I asked, do you think I'm causing trouble? Or did your family dig this hole for themselves 3 years ago? A few seconds of silence on the other end. Evelyn, well, if you need money, I can give you some. Don't take it this far. I laughed out loud. Julian, you still don't understand what's happening. Evelyn, I cut him off. Worry about yourself. What you're about to lose isn't just money. It's the illusion that I wouldn't dare to fight back. I hung up before he could say another word. Outside, the rain grew heavier, making the coffee shop feel even quieter. I sent a message to Leo. They filed for an extension. Leo replied immediately. I know. It was expected. For now, let them think they still have a way out. I watched the lights reflect on the wooden table. Their counterattack had begun, but it was just the first desperate thrashing of a beast that still thought it had claws. They didn't know that the legal lifeline they were trying to grasp had been locked the moment I signed my name. But letting them know too soon wouldn't be any fun. I stood up, wrapping my scarf around my neck. Tonight, I would let them believe they had turned the tide. Tomorrow, they would learn what it truly meant to have your lifeline cut. I went to the cafe where my mother spent every Sunday morning. It was a quiet place near the river, with old brown wooden tables and large glass windows overlooking the water. The space always made me feel smaller, shielded from the noise of the world. When I walked in today, she was already there. My mother, Catherine Hayes, a woman respected by everyone in the financial world. Not because she was rich, but because she was clear-headed. She looked up at me, her gaze not one of pity or blame, but of calm acceptance. You're here. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my hand closing around the cup of tea already prepared for me. Her eyes scanned my face, pausing for a second on the trace of exhaustion I hadn't managed to hide. You knew everything, didn't you? I asked softly. She set down her teacup. Your 3 years of silence were not in vain, Evelyn, and you are not as weak as they think. I faltered. My mother had never said that. For the 3 years I was a sterling, she had barely interfered, only checking in with short, occasional text messages. But today, her voice was different. She looked straight at me, her expression serious but not cold. Do you think I didn't know how your in-laws treated you? Do you think they could hide their financial dealings from me? Or do you think I would truly let you walk into that house empty-handed? My throat tightened. She continued. They thought you were a liability, a pretty face to complete the family picture. But they forgot where you came from. I clenched my fists under the table, my hands trembling slightly. My mother slid a thin file across the table. I recognized it immediately, a copy of the investment portfolio Leo had shown me. But this time, there was a small, clip note on the top right corner. A page I had never seen before. My name, Evelyn Hayes, was clearly stated. Heir to Capital Oversight Authority. Why do you think I was silent for 3 years? Because you are not a fool. You just weren't ready. I looked at my mother, tears welling in my eyes. But I held them back. I know they looked down on you. I know every word they said, every look they gave you. But if I had rushed in to protect you, you would have forever been the weak one who had to stand behind someone else. She reached out and gently touched my wrist. I wanted you to discover your own worth. I was silent for a long time, my heart a mixture of sadness, pain, and a strange sense of relief. But what truly stunned me was what she said next. Do you think Sterling Enterprises built itself? Their seed money came from Apex Capital. For me, I looked up, almost in disbelief. How much? My mother gave a faint smile. The number doesn't matter. What matters is that they used my reputation to build their family company. And then they turned around and humiliated my daughter. She paused, her voice dropping lower. And you were the one I chose to oversee that money. No one else. My hands shook as I opened the clip note. In the event the legal representative becomes incapable of exercising their duties, the right of oversight and clause activation shall be transferred to the designated heir, Evelyn Hayes. I looked at my mother. You prepared for this. Her eyes were calm. Before you were even married. I knew you wouldn't choose the wrong person, but I also knew people can change for money. She took my hand, her grip firm yet gentle. You are not as powerless as the Sterlings think. You just hadn't decided to stand up yet. I let out a laugh, a painful, but no longer bitter sound. My mother said, now you have stood up, and you have the right to take back what is yours. Not for revenge, but to restore fairness. I took a deep breath. A warm current ran through me, strong and sharp, as if I had just found a long-buried part of myself. I asked, if I see this through to the end, will you stand with me? She didn't answer right away. She poured more tea into my cup, then said, I don't stand on any side. I stand behind you. Those words made my chest feel tight, as if someone was gently squeezing it. For 3 years, I thought I was alone. I thought no one was on my side. I thought I had been thrown out of my husband's family like a useless piece of furniture no one wanted. But it turned out someone had been standing behind me all along. And that person was my mother. My phone buzzed with a message from David. They just had an emergency meeting. Victoria Sterling looks pale. They must know you were the one who signed. I locked the screen. My mother looked at me and asked softly, are you afraid? I shook my head. I only have one regret. What's that? That I was silent for so long. My mother smiled and took a sip of tea. Better late than never. I looked out the window. The sky was turning a silvery gray. A light breeze rippled across the river's surface. Just like me, a small movement, but enough to change the current. I stood up. I have to go. They're about to fight back. My mother nodded. Let them. The one who truly holds the power is you. I walked out of the cafe, the glass door closing behind me. In that moment, I knew I hadn't just received a secret clue. I had just received myself back. And in the battle ahead, I was no longer alone. The grand hall of the Riverside Mansion was ablaze with crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with luxury, expensive perfume mingling with the conversations of dozens of real estate partners and bankers. They were all gathered for the contract signing of a new luxury development worth over $200 million for Sterling Enterprises. I stood outside the glass doors, looking through a thin curtain. Victoria Sterling sat at the head of the table, her posture ramrod straight, her face cold but confident. Julian, in a black suit, was smiling as if he'd just won a high-stakes poker game. All around them were handshakes and the clinking of champagne glasses. No one had any idea what was coming. I walked in at the exact moment a bank representative was about to hand Victoria the pen. On behalf of the bank, we congratulate Sterling Enterprises. Before he could finish, the door to an adjacent meeting room burst open. A flustered bank employee rushed over and whispered into the ear of the department head. The man's face changed color instantly. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure, and announced clearly to the room of dozens of people, apologies, but the source account for this project's payment has just been frozen under an emergency capital withdrawal clause. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the head table. Victoria Sterling gripped the pen, her voice a low growl. What do you mean? Who froze it? The bank representative swallowed hard. Apex Capital activated the clause. The heir to the Capital Oversight Authority signed the order. A loud crash echoed through the room. Julian had dropped his champagne flute, the liquid spilling across the table like a spreading bloodstain. Whispers erupted. Partners murmured to each other. Bankers exchanged tense glances. The Sterling Enterprises leadership looked unsteady on their feet. And at that exact moment, I walked in. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was quiet, but echoed with sharp clarity. No one said another word. All heads turned to me, as if I had just thrown a bomb into the middle of their signing ceremony. Evelyn. Julian choked out my name, his face draining of color. What are you doing here? Victoria Sterling gritted her teeth, struggling to keep her composure. I walked straight to the center of the room, stopping before the massive conference table. The light from above cast my long shadow across the white marble. I looked directly at my former mother-in-law. You were wondering why the accounts were frozen? I paused, letting the tension thicken. I'll keep it simple. I spoke each word clearly. You took Apex Capital's money. I'm just taking it back. A few people in the back rows gasped as if they couldn't breathe. No one knew what right I had. No one knew what cards I was holding. The only thing that was clear was that I had just squeezed the financial heart of Sterling Enterprises right before they were about to sign a colossal deal. Victoria shot to her feet, pointing at me. You on what grounds? You're just the daughter-in-law who was kicked out of this house. I smiled softly. Wrong. I'm the capital supervisor for Apex, authorized 3 years ago. I have the right to withdraw capital at any time a violation is detected. The room buzzed with chatter. One of the partners whispered, "My God, so the seed money for Sterling Enterprises came from Apex?" Another said, "If that's true, then the emergency withdrawal clause is legally sound." Victoria's face was ashen. Julian staggered as if he'd lost his balance. "Evelyn, can we talk? You've misunderstood." I turned to him, my gaze so cold he had to look away. "I understand perfectly. Better than you can imagine." I looked around the opulent room where they had planned to celebrate their victory after kicking me out of their lives. But that victory would never come. I placed a copy of the withdrawal clause on the table. All financial violations have been sent to the bank and the auditing authorities. From this moment on, every dollar from Apex Capital will be leaving Sterling Enterprises. A loud murmur rippled through the crowd like a wave. Several partners stood up immediately, their faces pale with the fear of being implicated. Victoria slammed the table so hard the wood vibrated. "You dare destroy everything this family has built?" I looked at her, my voice as calm as if stating a plain truth. "I destroyed nothing. You crushed it yourself with your greed and your arrogance." I turned to leave, but before I did, I paused without looking back at them and said one final thing. 3 years ago, I was silent because I thought I was part of this family. Now, silence is no longer necessary. The glass door closed behind me. Inside, chaos erupted. They had officially fallen into the vortex of their own making. I walked away, feeling as if a stone that had been pressing on my heart for 3 years had finally been lifted. The first direct confrontation was over, but the biggest battle was still ahead. After the collapse of the contract signing, I left the riverside mansion amid the sounds of chaos erupting behind me. The sky was darkening, and a cool breeze was blowing, but my heart felt as hot as spreading embers. For the first time in 3 years, I no longer felt like the one being cornered. The moment I got into the car, my phone began to vibrate incessantly. The screen lit up with Julian's name. I let it ring. Next was Victoria. Then, the number of a Sterling Enterprises assistant, the chief accountant, the in-house lawyer, and even a relative who hadn't bothered to ask if I was dead or alive for the past 3 years. I let them all go to voicemail, the only sound the wind rushing past the car window. But they didn't give up. A moment later, a barrage of text messages began. "Evelyn, please listen to me. You've caused a huge problem. If you don't stop this, we'll all go down together. Call me back immediately." Followed by, "Evelyn, this is Victoria. I'm begging you. You're young and impressionable. Someone must have put you up to this, right? I'll give you time to reconsider. And then, you want to see this whole corporation fall, you witch? If you don't retract the order, I'll make your life a living hell." I looked at the last message and let out a soft laugh. Threats, sweet talking, and begging all within less than 30 minutes. A family that had once arrogantly treated me like a freeloader was now as scared of me as if a blade were at their throats. I called Leo. He answered instantly. "Evelyn, they've been calling you, haven't they?" "Practically the entire corporation," I replied. Leo's voice was calm but sharp. "Don't answer. Don't concede. Not a single word." I rested my head against the seat. I wasn't planning on it. Good. Because from now on, we're not just withdrawing capital. We're seizing all related assets. Prepare for the next step. I opened my laptop and connected to the internet right there in the car. The Apex Capital Management System appeared on the screen, a long report of running data. I spoke each word clearly. "Leo, I'm giving the order. Seize all assets held in trust for Sterling Enterprises, change the account locks, and initiate legal proceedings." Leo didn't reply immediately. He looked at me through the screen for a long second. "Evelyn, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure." A faint smile touched his lips. "All right, let the games begin." He sent out a series of commands. I watched the account charts change in real time, streams of money being pulled back to Apex like water receding from a breaking dam. Just then, my phone rang. This time, it wasn't Julian or Victoria. It was the central bank. I answered. "We're calling to confirm your signature is authentic. This is a high-level freeze order that affects foreign exchange systems. Do you wish to maintain this order?" I replied firmly, "Yes. And I request the support of regulatory bodies to investigate suspicious transactions from Sterling Enterprises." On the other end, the person paused for a few seconds, then replied, "We will cooperate. From now on, all transactions related to them are under red-level surveillance." I put the phone down, my heart pounding, but not from fear. I thought I would be scared, but I wasn't. I just felt a sense of peace. At that moment, my car stopped at an intersection. The streetlight illuminated my phone screen, making Julian's latest message starkly visible. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please, save us. I looked at the message, then locked the screen. 3 years ago, all I wanted was one sincere apology from him. But for those 3 years, they chose to trample on me. Now, they were asking me to save them. No one, I thought, can save those who are accustomed to looking down on others. I looked up at the night sky. A decision had just been made, and the door behind me had closed completely. The new path ahead was clearer than ever. I sent Leo one last message for the night. Leo, tonight, full lockdown. Tomorrow, we begin the seizures. He replied almost instantly. Understood, Evelyn. From now on, you're no longer the one on the defensive. You're the one holding the knife. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The decisive action had begun. And once I started walking, there was no turning back. The next morning, as news of the account freeze spread like wildfire through New York's financial circles, I sat in Leo's office. A large screen displayed the entire transaction system of Sterling Enterprises, flashing red with constant alerts. Each warning was the final twitch of a dying beast. Leo stood with his arms crossed, his voice even but sharp. They've started to offload assets. A final countermove. I sipped my coffee, calm. I know. That's why I only started tightening the screws yesterday. Leo looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. 3 years of silence, it turns out, was to prepare for this exact moment. I didn't reply, but his words made my heart clench not with pain, but with a sense of validation. My phone buzzed. A message from David. Miss Evelyn. They're doing 3 things. 1. Transferring money to the personal accounts of subordinates. 2. Fabricating reasons for urgent internal loans. 3. Preparing false documents to legitimize the funds that were already moved. I read each line slowly, each word a stab at the reputation of a once arrogant corporation. Chloe sent a message right after. The bank flagged a suspicious emergency disbursement request from Sterling. If you need it, I can get the internal copy. I replied, get everything. The more detailed, the better. As soon as the message was sent, David called. His voice was hoarse and low, like someone hiding in a small room. I'm on the 10th floor. The finance department is in chaos. But listen to this, they aren't just moving assets. They want to fabricate evidence that Apex forced their hand to turn the tables on you. I closed my eyes for a second. That was expected. David lowered his voice even more. Be careful. Victoria Sterling said this. If that girl takes me down, I'll drag her down with me. I let out a soft laugh. The laugh of someone who had stood up after being pushed down for too long. David, you just do your part. I can handle mine. When I hung up, Leo looked at me knowingly. Are you ready to launch the real attack? I nodded. There's no turning back. Leo pulled up a chair next to me and opened a thick file. I propose this. We gather all the evidence and organize it into 3 groups. 1. Personal fund transfers list of recipients, times, and unusual items. 2. Internal loans, fabricated reasons, cash flow, and signs of concealment. 3. Forged documents, signs of alteration, mismatched dates, and fake seals. I looked at the pages, all meticulously organized. Leo asked, anything you want to add? I replied immediately. Add a 4th section. I'll write my own testimony, detailing the 3 years they exploited Apex's reputation. Not legal, but enough for investigators to see a pattern of manipulation. Leo's eyebrows raised slightly. Evelyn, you really aren't the person you were 3 years ago. I smiled. Let's show them that silence doesn't mean weakness. We gotta work. Each piece of evidence was opened, magnified, analyzed, and marked. I noted every detail I had once ignored while living in their home. The suspicious invoices, the calls between the finance department and their relatives, the unexplained cash advances. I realized that during my 3 quiet years as a daughter-in-law, I had seen much more than I thought. I just hadn't had the strength to fight back then. That afternoon, David sent a file he called a special gift. I opened it. It was an audio recording. In it, Victoria Sterling's voice rang out clearly. It's my money. I can withdraw it if I want. Let's see what she can do to me. Then Julian's voice. Go ahead, Mom. I'll take care of the reports later. That girl doesn't know anything. I put the device down. My heart no longer felt sad or hurt. It was just cold. Leo played the recording. Listen to the whole thing, then looked at me. Evelyn, this is what can tip the scales overnight. I stood up, taking a deep breath. Leo, send this entire file to the bank's fraud department, the regulatory authorities, and Sterling Enterprises' strategic partners. He hesitated. Are you sure? Once it's sent, there's no taking it back. I looked at him, my voice low but resolute. What did they do to me for 3 years? Today, I'm just returning the favor at the right price. Leo nodded. All right, sending it now. As he hit the send button, I felt as if a heavy anchor had been dropped into the sea. There was no going back. I looked out the window, where the red sunset was dyeing the entire city. The counteroffensive had been activated, and this time, I was the one controlling every move. The news that a formal investigation had been launched spread as fast as a wildfire in the wind. Not just in financial circles, but across industry forums, investment blogs, and even among people who didn't follow the economy. Sterling Enterprises, a name once considered untouchable, was sinking like a massive ship with a hole too deep to patch. That morning, at precisely 7:45 a.m., a team from the Financial Investigation Agency appeared at the entrance of the Sterling Enterprises building. Dozens of employees stood frozen as the team swept in, armed with search warrants and evidence tape. David texted me immediately. Evelyn, they're searching from the 5th to the 12th floor. No one dares to breathe. Victoria Sterling was just asked to cooperate with the investigation. I stared at the message, feeling no joy, but no pity either. It was all just a consequence. By 10 a.m., Sterling Enterprises accounts were officially sealed completely. That meant no transactions, no disbursements, no debt payments, no new contracts, and no withdrawing a single dollar. A corporation that once considered money its lifeblood was now completely exsanguinated. The news was all over the financial papers. TV news channels ran red tickers. Sterling Enterprises accounts frozen, suspected of financial fraud. CEO Victoria Sterling summoned for questioning. Sterling stock plummets. I was sitting in Leo's office when the next notification arrived. Julian Sterling had been suspended from his position as division president to cooperate with the investigation. Leo showed me the news alert on his phone. Congratulations, Evelyn. The domino effect has begun. I didn't smile, but deep in my chest, I felt a profound sense of relief. That afternoon, I was invited to a private meeting for an information exchange. But I knew the person who had summoned me wasn't an investigator. It was Victoria Sterling. She sat in her vast office on the 18th floor. The same massive mahogany desk, the same walls covered in awards. But her aura of power was gone. I walked in. She looked up, her face paler than I'd ever seen it. The woman who had strode confidently through countless boardrooms now sat shrunken, her hands clasped together, her knuckles white. She spoke first, her voice familiar but clearly trembling. Evelyn, have a seat. I pulled out a chair and sat opposite her, just far enough to see her expression clearly. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. What do you want? After doing all this, what do you want from me? I observed her for a moment before answering. This isn't about revenge or destruction. It's about the truth. I want what belongs to me to be called by its proper name. She frowned. Its proper name? I leaned forward, my voice slow but not soft. 3 years ago, I was called a freeloader, but the seed money for this corporation came from Apex Capital, from my mother. I was considered useless, yet I was the capital supervisor. I was seen as someone who only knew how to bow her head, but my signature could freeze Sterling's entire financial system. I paused, looking deep into her eyes. I just want the truth to be put in its rightful place. She gripped her hands so tightly, her nails dug into her palms. Don't you feel cruel doing this? Sterling Enterprises is my life's work. It's my blood, everything I've built. Do you want to destroy it all? I shook my head. No, I'm not destroying anything. I'm just pulling back the part that you forgot belonged to someone else. She opened her mouth but couldn't speak. A single tear, something I never thought I'd see from that woman, shimmered at the corner of her eye, and she uttered the words I never imagined I would hear. Evelyn, I'm begging you. Stop. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I stood up. You're mistaken. I haven't started anything yet, so there's nothing to stop me. Her eyes wavered. What? What more could you want? I walked to the door, but before opening it, I turned back and said softly, I don't want anything from you. I just want to see justice in its rightful place. The door closed. Inside, Victoria Sterling collapsed into her chair, and I walked away, my legs no longer shaking. The villain had begun to pay the price. Not because I was strong, but because the truth had finally grown large enough to demand its due. The courtroom was packed that morning. Sunlight streamed through the high arched windows, falling onto the long wooden benches, casting solemn shafts of light that matched the atmosphere. I walked in no jewelry, no lavish dress, just a simple, well-tailored black suit. My shoulders were straight, my face no longer bearing the fear it had 3 years ago. Across from me, just a few feet away, sat Victoria and Julian Sterling. She was still wearing an expensive suit, but her face was gaunt, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. Julian was thinner, his hair unkempt, his eyes vacant like a man who had lost his way. The judge's gavel struck. The hearing on the case of financial fraud involving Sterling Enterprises is now in session. Leo stood up first. He presented the case clearly, methodically, point by point. His voice was not that of someone defending me, but of justice itself. Your Honor, for the past 3 years, Sterling Enterprises has used investment capital from Apex Capital for unapproved purposes. They transferred funds to personal accounts, created false documents, fabricated internal loans, and used these methods to embezzle assets. Leo projected the evidence we had collected onto a large screen. The late-night transactions, the list of relatives' accounts that received unexplained funds, the disbursement requests with matching amounts but different dates, and especially the audio recording from David. Victoria's voice filled the courtroom. It's my money. I can withdraw it if I want. Let's see what she can do to me. A murmur went through the room. Some people looked at her, their expressions no longer filled with respect. The judge asked, Miss Sterling, do you deny that the voice in this recording is yours? She was silent for 5 seconds, each one like a needle piercing the air. Finally, she nodded slightly. It's me. The courtroom held its breath. That quiet admission was the collapse of an empire. When the judge called Julian to the stand, he approached the witness box with hands that trembled so much he had to grip the wooden ledge. His voice was choked. I knew it was wrong, but I was just following my mother's orders. Leo immediately objected. But you were the one who signed the transfer orders. You participated directly in legitimizing the illegally withdrawn funds. You are legally responsible. Julian bit his lip. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. Evelyn, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I never thought things would go this far. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I stood up, not flinching from his gaze. Your apology only has value before someone has to pay the price. My words made him slump back into his chair. The courtroom was silent. For them, it was an ending long overdue. After nearly 4 hours of questioning and cross-examination, the judge began to deliver the verdict. His voice was clear and unwavering. Based on the evidence and testimony presented, this court finds Sterling Enterprises liable. They are ordered to return the full principal investment to Apex Capital, plus accrued interest. Victoria Sterling is barred from corporate leadership for 10 years. Julian Sterling is subject to a significant fine and is responsible for compensating for financial damages caused by his misconduct. The case of asset embezzlement will be forwarded to the Criminal Division for further investigation. The gavel struck. A heavy, final sound, but for me, it brought a sense of release. Justice, at last, was present cold, but fair. As I gathered my documents to leave, a soft voice called from behind me. Evelyn, I turned. Julian stood there, his eyes red, looking like a man who had lost everything. I just want to ask, did you ever truly love me? I looked at him for a moment. The old memories flooded back. The times I silently endured. The times I tried to keep the peace to protect this family. And the times they trampled on my self-respect. Finally, I answered, yes. But that was in the past. In the present, everyone must pay the price for what they've done. I turned and walked away without looking back. This time, I no longer belonged to the past. 3 months after the trial, my life felt like a new page. Not a dazzling, extravagant, or magnificent page, but one that was neat, clear, and entirely my own. The first morning I woke up in my new apartment, I immediately felt the difference. No sound of my mother-in-law's slippers in the hallway. No sound of Julian shouting at employees from his study. No criticism. No scrutinizing glares. No pressure to please anyone. Just the sound of a gentle breeze and the sunlight filtering through the window. My apartment was less than 800 square feet, but every tile, every table was chosen by me. Every light bulb was installed by my own hands. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. One morning, I made a cappuccino, sat down at the small wooden table by the window, and looked out at the balcony where the few flower pots I had just planted were dewy. My new life began with small things like that. That afternoon, I went to Apex Capital, but not to hide behind my mother's shadow anymore. I walked into the building as the person taking over the capital stream my mother had quietly managed. A new project was proposed, and for the first time, my name was on the file. The project was named the Hayes Initiative. As I looked at my name printed on the presentation board, I gently touched the edge of the paper. My hand no longer trembled. I no longer felt small, faded, or drowned out by other voices. Leo walked over, placing a stack of documents lightly on the table. Everything is ready. This project is entirely your call. I smiled. Thank you, Leo. He looked at me, his gaze soft but deep. You know, Evelyn, the day you stood up, it wasn't just you who changed. Everyone around you saw the strength of a woman who knows her own worth. I didn't say anything, just nodded and walked into the conference room. Today was the first presentation of a project that bore my own signature. That evening, I opened my journal, the one I had written in for 3 years as Julian's wife. Pages stained with tears, lines of hurried script recording the days I felt meaningless. Now, I turned to a new page. I wrote, "Never underestimate a silent woman. When she is quiet, she is calculating." I closed the book. In the silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, no longer chaotic with pain, but the steady rhythm of someone who knows where she is going. I walked out onto the balcony. The New York evening was cool and gentle. The streetlights reflected on the river like a cascade of fallen stars. I once thought that life could only change when other people changed. But now, I understood that life changes when you yourself stand up. I wondered, if I had been stronger 3 years ago, would things have been different? Then I smiled. It didn't matter. The most important thing was that I stood up at the exact moment I was ready. I leaned against the railing, watching the light dance on the water, and whispered, as if to myself, but also to anyone listening to this story. If it were you, when would you stand up? When you're pushed to the brink, or when you realize your own value is greater than what others try to label you with? Everyone has their own answer. But just remember, a woman's silence is never a sign of weakness. It's preparation. I went back inside, turned off the light, leaving the soft night outside the door. My story isn't over, and I believe that those of you reading these lines, following my journey, also have your own stories waiting to be told. I'll see you in the next story, where we will explore together the true power of endurance, of self-respect, and of knowing the right time to rise.